Good evening. Welcome to our study tonight. Tonight we're going to go in the news first, obviously. And let me give you this one under New World Order. I'll put that chart up for you. And I know some of you have been following this. It's been all over the news. But 3 ways God is using Trump's guilty verdict to teach the church. So we don't always understand why some things happen, but we know that God is sovereign. It doesn't happen without his knowledge. Putting the blatant inconsistencies on the left aside, such as if Trump was a Democrat, none of this would have happened, to ignoring the Epstein list and the Biden family criminal allegations, all of which are worse than obviously Trump's charges. God allowed this verdict to happen. But why? Well, here are 3 possibilities. Number 1, and again, this may be hard for people to hear, but you need to hear it all. We reap what we sow. Actions have consequences. Like all of us, Donald Trump's choices made earlier in his life have consequences that we've exposed dealings in the past. But the Banana Republic of America is acting just like the Pharisees Jesus criticized when he said blind guides who strain out at a gnat and swallow a camel, Matthew. He was criticizing them because they focused on unimportant details while ignoring the truly important things. So as Christians, we forgive and we allow people to move on. We are not electing, let me remind you, a pastor-in-chief, but a commander-in-chief. I can unapologetically say that his personal character does not matter to me nearly as much as the left's approval of killing the unborn, allowing men to enter women's locker rooms, and turning a blind eye to trafficking children. How deceived are we when things such as murdering and exploiting the innocent are no big deal, but Trump's character is? At least be consistent. While on the topic of sowing and reaping, many are sowing to the wind and will reap the whirlwind of God's judgment. Make no mistake, America will answer for her corrupt legislatures and ungodly legislation on both sides of the political aisle. Number 2, ways God is using Trump's guilty verdict to teach the church. Number 2, clear lines are being drawn right now. Through events like these, God reveals who and what people and churches stand for. Trump is hated, not because of his character, but because of what he stands for. He's a disruptive force. To those who oppose Trump, if the abortion industry, George Soros, most of the media, and Hollywood are on your side, are you sure you're on the right side? Tragically, many churches have become weak and they become woke. We've created a generation that seeks teachers who tickle ears rather than challenge hearts. These teachers know nothing of the calling of Jeremiah, in which God's word was like a fire that devoured and a hammer that shattered. Instead, they prophesy smooth things. They encourage sin, and people love to have it that way. The liberal churches and pastors in America are leading people straight to hell, not because they do not support Trump, but because they do not support the gospel and its call to repentance from sexual sin and pride. These liberal churches are failing to lead people back to God. When a vessel is struck, what's inside spills out, and what is spilling out is a stench in the nostrils of God. Number 3, what many trust in is being tested to the core. I cringe when I see posts comparing Trump to Jesus, and I fear for millions who view him as their savior. I understand their frustrations with America, but we must set our gaze upon God and fan the flames of personal revival. It is only when the whole heart is gripped with passion and prayer that the life-giving fire descends. For none but the earnest man gets access to the ear of God. We need to return to the old paths. Where are yesterday's altars of prayer? Where are the saints that love to linger in his presence? The weeping, the crying, the interceding for lost souls. The church needs to wake up. Our prayer should be, "Oh Lord, we need fire again," and begin in me. But be crystal clear. To be crystal clear, in my opinion, this is a plea for full surrender to Christ. He's the only one that can cure our chaos, the only anchor for our storm, and the only hope for the hurting. The prejudiced, power-hungry political machine in America is consuming itself. It's ungodly, it's selfish, it's prideful, and it's arrogant. God is using Trump in all of his shortcomings to expose it, and he is not far from destroying it, and that's my opinion. Let me give you a little bit more as we go on. This one has to do with the economy. I have quite a few with the economy, by the way. Biden plans to turn American dream of retirement into a nightmare. If you're one of the millions of Americans struggling to save for retirement today, get ready for more struggle. At least if President Joe Biden gets his way. He's proposing a tax hike on savings that would mean a negative rate of return for many people after adjusting for inflation. Let me explain it. As part of his trillions of dollars in tax hikes, Biden has proposed a 45% tax on capital gains, painting it as a tax on the boogeyman of greedy billionaires. That's not true. In reality, 12.5 million Americans, mostly middle class, pay this tax on their retirement savings. That's why every American should be horrified that Biden wants to raise this tax to the highest rate in 111 years. Such a move would severely hamper people's ability to save for retirement and would cripple economic growth. The declining value of the dollar is critical when planning for retirement, since it means you need to be prepared to pay much more in the future as the cost of living climbs even higher. The result of such punitive taxes is people will save less, meaning they will invest less, which takes away the key driver of economic growth. If massive tax hikes on investments are so detrimental to individuals and the economy at large alike, why would Biden propose such a disastrous policy? In short, because he and the rest of Washington, D.C. are addicted to spending. Just a few weeks ago, the White House proposed a gargantuan federal budget of $7.3 trillion, a level not even reached during COVID-19 pandemic, along with $4.9 trillion in future tax hikes. This translates, you ready for it, into $36,000 of additional taxes per family in America. Much of the White House's proposed tax increases on investment will be hidden from view, but will nonetheless hamper your attempts to save and eventually retire. Whether it's capital gains tax, corporate income tax, or the hidden tax of inflation, the government will get its pound of flesh, or in this case, 7.3 trillion pounds. Biden is turning an American dream of retirement into a nightmare. And there are still people wanting to vote for this guy. I have one question. Why? Why? Be intellectual. Do your homework. Find out what he's doing. He is hurting America. Let me go a little further. Is the stage being set for the global food crisis prophecy of Revelation 6:6? Will we soon see a major prophecy in the book of Revelation be fulfilled? Global food prices have skyrocketed, and hunger has been spreading like wildfire all over the world like never before. Bad news about harvest forecasts just continues to pour in for many of the planet's most important agricultural regions. Global food supplies just keep getting tighter and tighter. Could it be possible that the stage is now being set for the global food crisis prophesied in Revelation 6:6? In that verse, we are warned of a time when food prices will soar to absolutely frightening levels. Then I heard a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a day's wages, 3 quarts of barley for a day's wages, and don't harm the oil or the wine." We certainly haven't reached that point yet, but are we on our way there? Here are just a few examples. Orange juice prices have more than doubled in the last 12 months due to poor harvests in Brazil. Prices of the breakfast staple have been climbing rapidly in recent years, partly driven by declining output in Florida, the main producer of orange juice in the United States, and climate-fueled extreme weather in the main orange-producing areas of Brazil. Some orange juice producers are actually considering turning to alternative fruits. Fruits such as mandarins, as wholesale prices have gone bananas amidst fears of a poor harvest in Brazil. The price of coffee is also going haywire. So if you love coffee, I'd stock up on it right now while you can. Coffee prices soared this past Tuesday on concerns that excessive dryness in Brazil again and Vietnam will damage coffee crops and curb global production. Wheat is specifically mentioned in Revelation 6:6. The price of wheat is at an all-time highest level in 8 years. As cold and dry weather in major producers are the ongoing war in Ukraine deepen the supply concerns for wheat. Historically, low rainfall in Western Australia is also adding to the nervousness. Unfortunately, it's just the beginning. I'm convinced that the price of wheat will soon go far higher than it is right now. So if you think that the price of bread is high now, just wait until you see what's coming next. Meanwhile, the price of beef just surged to another brand new all-time record high. Are you hearing these all-time record highs? You hear it over and over again. All fresh beef retail value shot up to $794.90 in April, according to the Economic Research Council, the highest price on record. There it is again. The size of the U.S. cattle herd is the smallest that it's been in decades. Beef will soon be a luxury that only the wealthy will be able to afford on a regular basis. And if you don't think that's true, Just track McDonald's and how they're raising their prices on their hamburgers. You may be thinking that if beef gets too expensive, you'll just eat more chicken and turkey. Well, sadly, chicken and turkey prices are poised to go a lot higher thanks to H5N1 bird flu. Iowa Republican Governor Kim Reynolds just signed a disaster proclamation on Tuesday as public health officials prepare to euthanize more than 4 million chickens exposed to a highly contagious bird flu. In total, some 4.2 million chickens will be put down. Just think about that last sentence for a moment. 4.2 chickens put down. That's losing 4.2 million chickens. What would you think that'll do to egg prices? To make matters worse, one of the nation's largest producers of free-range eggs just experienced a devastating fire, killing millions of chickens. Farina Farms Inc., Poultry Farms, was engulfed in flames last Wednesday evening and has resulted in millions of chickens being killed. 1.3 million chickens died. 30 fire departments from across the region helped to put a fire out. It's a significant loss. Foreigners now control more than 43 million acres of U.S. farmland. Let me repeat that, and that should deeply concern us. 43 million acres, foreigners. A recent map has revealed the alarming trend of the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, acquiring vast swaths of American farmland, raising serious national security concerns. Why do they want our farmland? Why do they want that? Well, obviously, it's pretty obvious. They stop our crops. They hurt America and Americans. So they expanded to nearly 43.4 million acres. That was in 2022, and it's even more now. From nearly 13,720 acres they owned in 2010 to nearly 43 million acres right now. 13,000 to 43 million. Chinese entities hold ownership of farmlands across 29 of the 50 United States. Global food supplies will get tighter and tighter. Now it's happening right in front of our eyes. And hundreds of millions of people are going to bed hungry every single night. I wish that I could tell you that things should get better. I can't. We really are living in the end times, and the things that are written in the book of Revelation really will take place. And it makes me mad. Let me tell you why it makes me mad, because you have politicians arguing about nitpicking things when these are serious things that they should be concerned about. Let me go a little bit further and tell you about, while we're talking about politicians and the government, the Fed, not a government agency by the way, is already insolvent. Here's how we think it plays out. The Federal Reserve is already insolvent. According to its most recent annual financial statements, the Fed has just $51 billion in equity versus a whopping $948 billion in mark-to-market losses. This means the Fed is insolvent by roughly $900 billion. That's a big problem. Remember, the Fed is still a bank. It has financial obligations, liabilities, and depositors that it needs to pay. For example, commercial banks like JP Morgan and Bank of America have deposited a total of $3.4 trillion of their customers' money, your money, my money, with the Fed. And the Treasury Department holds another $700 billion deposit at the Fed. The Fed owes money to foreign governments also. They owe trillions of dollars from repurchase agreements to banks and businesses across the global financial system. So yes, the insolvency of the Federal Reserve is a very, very, very big deal. Yet at least for now, no one's saying a word about it. You won't hear about it on the news. You won't hear about it anywhere. Sooner or later, someone is finally going to say something, or hopefully do something, about the Fed's insolvency. There's a good chance that that means betting against the dollar. And that would ultimately reduce the value of the dollar, increase inflation, and trigger a new Bretton Woods agreement in which the United States dollar is no longer the world's reserve currency. Within the next several years, there could be some Chinese or Russian financier who becomes known as the man who broke the Fed. This is not sensationalism. The Fed is already insolvent at the end by $900 billion, according to its own financial statements. Social Security is insolvent. The U.S. government is insolvent by tens of trillions of dollars, and they further anticipate the national debt to grow by $20 trillion over the next decade. These are the facts, not the fantasies. Well, down home, it hits everybody. Why are vast numbers of people relocating to small towns all over America? In recent years, Americans have been fleeing our largest cities in unprecedented numbers, and many of them have decided to settle down in quiet little towns all over the country. There are 124 cities with a population of over 200,000 in the United States. More than 90% of the U.S. population growth last year took place outside those 124 largest cities. A third of those cities lost population last year. Roughly a third that lost the population were located in New York and California. The three largest cities in the United States, New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, all lost populations in 2023. Between the three cities, more than 700,000 people have left since the 2020 census. New York is by far the biggest loser. They have lost 546,000 people. It's almost 7% of their population. Violence, theft, drugs, homelessness, international migration have all risen to crisis levels and are putting a tremendous amount of strain on our largest urban areas. Meanwhile, small towns over the United States are booming as wave after wave of big city residents come pouring in. The domestic migration losses were concentrated in the largest metro areas with more than 4 million residents. These cities shed a total of 400,000 residents annually before the pandemic and have lost, you ready for it, 820,000, 707,000, and 509,000 residents respectively over the past 2 years. Last year, small towns became the nation's top destination for the first time in decades. So why is that happening? Well, there's a number of reasons why so many people are relocating to small towns these days. For many, the quality of life in big U.S. cities has become utterly deplorable. For example, one young Chicago mother recently had to wait 4 hours for a police officer to show up after the masked robbers entered her home. I don't know anyone who would want to live in Chicago at this point. Of course, the exact same thing can be said about most of our large cities. It's happening all over. Another reason why a lot of Americans are choosing to relocate has to do with taxes. There's been a mass exodus of high-tax states, and Massachusetts is one of those that is being hit really hard. Massachusetts is in danger of losing nearly $1 billion in annual revenue over the coming years as high state taxes trigger the exodus of wealthy residents. The cost of living crisis also we are currently facing is another factor that is motivating vast numbers of Americans to relocate. At this point, we're being told, you ready for this, that Mississippi has the lowest cost of living in the entire nation. Imagine stepping into a world where your paycheck stretches like bubblegum when the promise of Southern charm meets you at every corner. Welcome to Mississippi, a land where the living is easy and the cost of easy is living is easy. Home prices in Mississippi range from $32,000 to $240,000, depending on the city. But where's the perfect place to settle down? Well, you'll want a location that has like-minded people, that has a low population density, that has low risk of experiencing major national disasters, and that is not near any important military targets. Such areas have become very popular in recent years, and home prices are going through the roof. For example, the median home price in Bozeman, Montana has risen to about median $770,000. That's a city of 56,000 people, not far from Yellowstone National Park, an upscale Big Sky skiing community. It has had so many out-of-state arrivals over the years that Montanans sometimes refer to it as Bosangeles. Bumper stickers proclaiming some version of Montana is full abound in the state. A lot of Americans now find themselves priced out of many of the most desirable communities in the country, and that's extremely unfortunate. If you're considering relocating to another part of the nation, I encourage you to do so soon, because global events are starting to really go haywire, and the clock is ticking. Another one. This one's under war. America's double game on Iran bodes trouble for everyone. While attention is focused on Rafah, I just talked to somebody from Israel today, and they told me that they also think that the war is going to continue for about 7 more months in Rafah. They told me that the cities up by Tiberias are all the hotels that used to house tourists are all filled with refugees from the cities that are on the border with Lebanon and Syria. And so we're watching this thing get really way out of hand. So while the attention is focused on Rafah and the world's energies are directed at punishing Israel for daring to defend itself against extermination, an enemy of humanity is about to get the nuclear bomb. And the Biden administration, despite its furious denials, is helping them to do so. A leaked report this week by the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, has stated that Iran's stockpile of 60% highly enriched uranium has risen since February by 23 kilograms to 142 kilograms. It's the highest level ever to date. U.S. officials say that this material could be converted into weapon-grade enriched uranium in a couple of days. By the way, it would be enough for 3 nuclear weapons. And let me tell you what Iran will do if they get 3 nuclear weapons. They'll fire them off immediately. They're going to do that. Yet, according to a report in the Wall Street Journal, the Biden administration has pressured these countries, which are France, United Kingdom, and Germany, that are going against Iran. They're pressuring them. The Biden administration is pressuring them to back off any censorship from Iran. It's also urged a number of other countries to abstain in any censure vote. United Kingdom, France, and Germany have broken ranks now with America. European diplomats say that although Iranian violations of the NPT are unprecedented in number, they're going against the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty. The Biden administration appears unwilling either to pursue a serious diplomatic effort with Tehran or take punitive actions in its nuclear aggressions. From putting pressure on Tehran, the Biden administration has been systematically appeasing it. Washington has refused to support a fresh IAEA censure of Iran. Instead, the U.S. has unfrozen Iranian assets and helped Tehran evade sanctions through waivers that have funneled billions into its coffers. Far worse, the Biden administration has constantly undermined Israel's attempt to defend itself in the multi-front war being waged against it by Iranian proxies. The United States has actually helped Hamas in Gaza by forcing Israel into paralyzing hostage negotiations, insisting on supplying Gaza with humanitarian aid, most of which was stolen by Hamas to strengthen and enrich itself, and forbidding the Israelis to launch a preemptive strike on Hezbollah, neutralize the vast missile batteries there, which have been unleashing attacks upon northern Israel ever since October 7th. In other words, although the U.S. initially rushed to Israel's defense, this was part of Biden's administration's strategy of double talk, and that's all he does is double talk, appearing to support the Jewish state by providing it with sufficient defenses to avoid annihilation, while ensuring it can't win against Hamas or Hezbollah. That only makes sense if you realize that America aims to keep the Iranian regime in play, and that doesn't make sense at all. The murderous Iranian regime is a threat to the entire world. It's waged a war against America and the West since it came to power in 1979. Its intent is to destroy Israel. Iran is supplying Russia with arms, is in bed with the communist China. It takes Western hostages, and it murders its internal opponents. So why in heaven's name would the U.S. want to prop up this evil Iranian regime? Well, it's because of the Obama doctrine of realignment, to establish a new regional order in the Middle East. America's allies, Obama said, needed to learn to share the neighborhood with Iran. You can't share the neighborhood with Iran. Their hostility, he says, was preventing Washington from exploiting the more pragmatic dimensions on the Iranian regime. The hostility? The hostility of American allies was due to their understanding that the Iranian regime wasn't pragmatic at all, but driven by totally uncompromising and murderous religious fanaticism. According to the realignment doctrine, however, Obama's, America would help its allies protect themselves against Iranian or Iran-backed attacks, but would force them to respect Iran's position of power in places such as Syria, in Iraq, and Yemen. On the sidelines of the funeral of Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi, who was killed in a helicopter crash early this month, a meeting of the Resistance Front was held in Tehran. It is attended by Iranian military commanders, representatives of Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine, Hezbollah, and the Houthis of Yemen. Their topic was the need to continue jihad, I'm quoting, and struggle until a complete victory is achieved in Gaza Strip with the participation of all the resistance groups in the region. It's called to a global war. The head of this murderous snake is Iran, yet America refuses to lop it off. As a result, the Biden administration now poses a danger not just to Israel, but to America itself and the free world. And let me add this. I used to think, that Biden was a danger to America. I no longer think that. Now I believe he's a threat to the world and all of mankind. The faster we get rid of him, the safer the world will be. And you can argue with me or disagree with me, but I promise you, I'm holding my ground. Let me give you a little bit about religion, what's going on there. Is America becoming an anti-Christ nation? Once upon a time, America was a Christian nation. For most of our history, the population of the United States was overwhelmingly Christian, and the values that governed our society were primarily Christian values. But of course, you know this, everything's changed in recent decades. When Barack Obama boldly declared, quote, "We do not consider ourselves a Christian nation," end of quote, in 2009, he was speaking the truth. So if we aren't a Christian nation at this point, what exactly are we? And this is really good, really gets into the depth of it. According to the Pew Research Center, 64% of Americans still consider themselves to be Christian. So are we a Christian nation? Well, hang on. If nearly 2/3 of your people consider themselves to be Christian, that would seem to indicate that you are a Christian nation. But we obviously aren't. Just look around. Many of the signs and symbols and messages we see around our overtly anti-Christian country. So what in the world is going on? Well, ultimately, there's lots of Christians that still identify themselves as Christians, even though they have completely abandoned everything that Christianity represents. Joe Biden is a perfect example. He says he's a Christian. He says he attends church regularly. But then the rest of the time, he's working very, very hard against virtually everything that the Bible teaches. Of course, he's far from alone. According to George Barna, 6% of Americans, listen to this, had a biblical worldview in 2020. That's dropped to 4% today. I wish I could tell you that these numbers aren't accurate, but they are. Barna says that there's a second group that has a substantial number of beliefs and behaviors consistent with biblical principles, but unfortunately that group fell from 25% in 2020, just 14% today. When you add the two groups together, it comes to a grand total of 18% of the population. That's just depressing. So what about everyone else? And this is where it really hits the nail on the head. Well, just about everyone else would fall into Barna's world citizen category. The bulk of the American population, 82%, falls into the world citizen category, described like this: people who may embrace a few biblical principles, but generally believe and behave in ways that are distinctly different from biblical teaching. This group has grown substantially from 69% registered in 2020 to almost 82%. I think the term world citizen perfectly describes most people these days. The vast majority of the population has embraced the new values that are constantly being pushed on us by the Western elite. And this is clearly showing up in the poll numbers. Close to 2/3 of the U.S. population disapproves of the Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe versus Wade. We live in a country in which nearly 2/3 of the population claim to be Christian, but nearly 2/3 of the population also wants Roe versus Wade back. That just doesn't make any sense. And watch this. 71% of the population approve of gay marriage. Bisexuality is the most common LGBTQ status among Generation Z, Millennials, and Generation X. 15% of all Generation Z adults, representing more than 2/3 of those with an LGBTQ identification, are bisexual. So what values are being relentlessly promoted by just about every major institution in our society? Well, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be. Is Christ and his values being promoted? Or is it the opposite? At this point, even the U.S. military is systematically promoting values that are directly opposed to the values that we find in the Bible. Judicial Watch announced today, Wednesday, received 25 pages of records regarding drag shows, drag story hours, and other pride events for military personnel and their dependent minors organized and paid for by the United States Air Force. The documents were obtained through a May 5th, 2023 Freedom of Information Act. Jesus said, "You would know a tree by the fruit it produces." Needless to say, the fruit that America is producing is not Christian at all. Let me give you a little bit behind the scenes. Christian revival could transform Iran. Now, let me just tell you what's happening. America is pretty much anti-Christian, and you're not going to believe this, but Iran, the people of Iran, are getting saved all over the place. Can you imagine the irony of that? The current and ongoing war is presenting Israel with a multi-front existential threat that is not seen since the 1973 Yom Kippur War. But unlike the previous wars, the current conflict is being pressed by a non-Arab Shia element, Iran. Indeed, the October 7th attacks by Hamas was ordered by Iran to sidetrack the imminent mobilization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel, which would have consulted in the jewel in the crown. That's what the Obama Accords were, to the benefit of both countries. As the home to Mecca and the leader of the Sunni Arab world, Saudi Arabia is the nemesis of the Shia non-Arab Iran. The reason why Iran is trying to go against Israel is they do not want Saudi Arabia in the Abraham Accords. They don't want them joining. Why? Because their capital is there. Mecca is there. Despite decades of explicit threats and aggression, last month marked the first time Iran directly attacked Israel. Indeed, Iran's many proxies in the region, Hezbollah to the north and Houthis to the south, joined in, helping Hamas despite not sharing any interest in the Arab Sunni terrorist organization other than a mutual hatred of the Jewish state and a desire to serve their masters in Tehran. Iran's economy would have catastrophically crashed had it not been an injection of billions of dollars, followed by the signing of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which you know as the Iran nuclear deal President Barack Obama signed and President Donald Trump withdrew. Trump had Iran on its heels, had no money for anything, nothing for terrorism, nothing for anything. He shut it all down. But thanks to Joe Biden, who's corrupting the entire world, money is flowing all over the place in Iran, and that's why these wars are happening. Biden did remove the economic sanctions, reviving the Iranian recovery and economy. The current Iranian-sponsored conflict exploded as a result of Biden money into Iran. While the situation seems intractable and an impossibility and complex, there is a solution that could bring peace to Iran overnight. Listen to this, it's good news. While it involves a revolution in Iran, it does not require violence and is indeed a peaceful, faith-based response. Indeed, this revolution has already begun in Iran. A Christian revival is slowly growing in Iran. Christianity in Iran dates back to the early years of the religion during the times of Jesus, predating Islam. Sunni Islam arrived during the Middle Ages after the Arab conquest, and the Shia Islam is the Safavid version of the 15th century, become the official religion soon after. Today, over 99% of Iranians are Muslim, with 90 to 95% being Shia. Yet, according to many scholars, Iran today is witnessing the highest rate of Christianization in the world. Let me read it to you. Highest rate of Christianization in the world. The Christian population of Iran was about 170,000 in 1999. Unaffiliated estimates claim the number might have climbed to somewhere between 1 and 4 million in a population of almost 87 million. From 170,000, it's grown to 4 million. What's happening? Well, we're getting reports from the Fox's book from the Martyrs book that there a lot of Muslims are seeing Jesus at their bedsides. They're seeing him in dreams, and there's a viable restoration going on among evangelism, even though you could be killed doing it. Human rights groups have reported that Christians, particularly those who converted to Christianity from Islam, are severely oppressed in the Islamic Republic. Those who convert from Christianity from Islam can practice their faith only in secret in so-called house churches. Conversion from Islam to Christianity is illegal in Iran. Fines, lashing, prison terms, the death penalty. Converts can lose their inheritance. Unmarried Christians can be forced into marrying a Muslim, and married believers are forced into divorce or face losing their children. Despite the oppression, one exiled Iranian Christian leader, Bishop Edward Hosseini, leader of the non-denominational Iranian Christian Church in Europe, told Tablet magazine recently that, quote, 6 of every 10 Iranians are prepared to become Christians. 6 of every 10. Listen, you try to stamp Christianity out, it's like trying to stamp out a fire. All you do is spread the fire and spread the embers. So, this astonishing wave of Christianity was confirmed last week in WorldNet Daily, an interview with Marzi Arzaman, a Christian who converted from Islam while in Iran. Marzi, as she prefers to be called, is Iranian who immigrated to the U.S. after being sentenced to death by hanging in Iran for a crime of converting to Christianity. Against all odds, she was born into a Muslim family, became a Christian in Iran. She said this, I lived in Iran for 33 years, and I became a Christian more than 20 years ago. I served the Lord there for almost 5 years before I got arrested. I have lots of experience of sharing my faith, sharing Jesus, sharing the Bible, and many other Iranians were evangelizing. I connected with thousands of Iranians. Honestly, the majority of Iranians were open and receptive to Christianity. So many are tired of the Islamic regime. Iranians do not see themselves as Muslims, as in other countries, especially Arabic countries. They don't practice Islam in their home. We're talking about Iran. Our language is Farsi, not Arabic. We know that we are Persians, descended from the generation of King Cyrus. The majority of millions of Iranians believe that their land and their country have been taken hostage by these radical Muslims. There are many churches in Iran, Marcy said. We don't know exactly how many, but based on research by some Christian ministries, Iran is the fastest growing churches in the world. But taking on the Christian faith is only part of the change that's so eminent in Iran. She emphasized that the Islamic regime is not just a threat to Israel, but to all Western society. She said, I'm proud to be an American right now. This is my home, my country. I care about this country, but I see how brainwashed the youth of this country with radical Islam. So many youth blindly go to the streets and call for the genocide of the Jews. They're waving the flag of Hezbollah and Hamas and burning their own flag. It reminds me exactly what happened in Iran in 1979. Many students went into the streets, rioting and looting in the name of socialism, Marxism, and communism. They supported a fanatic Muslim Khomeini, and it's now more than 40 years, and they are suffering tremendously. I experienced the brutality of the Islamic regime. We don't have much time. It's important to know that these people have an evil nature, and they possess nuclear bombs. They just fired more than 300 missiles and drones at the state of Israel. They will not hesitate to fire a nuclear weapon at Israel or even the United States, and they are saying so openly. All right, let me give a couple more. Moral decay, a backlash. Companies tone down June Pride Month plans to escape backlash. Look at this right here. Those are the companies right now that are backing down on their Pride Month. It wasn't long ago, mainstream media loved Pride Month, trying to flex their consumer muscle. But what happened? Here's what happened. The firepower that consumers have unleashed against brands like Target, Anheuser-Busch, Nike, Disney, Planet Fitness, and others that put companies on defense at a time of year when they used to be passing the left's annual test of LGBTQ loyalty. Now it's going down. Now it used to be, how can we maximize our visibility on Pride Month? The question now is, what can we do to show our support without burning consumer bridges? The result, USA Today's Jessica Ginn points out, is much more muted June than in the past. Except for a few rainbow logos for Pride Month, it's actually being toned down. The modest approach to Pride Month probably won't sit well with the architects of sexual radicalism. But what happened is, you can guess what happened. What happened is Anheuser-Busch, Dylan Mulvaney, the corporate partnership poisoned the profit well. 297 businesses, 297, you're seeing some of their logos right there, scaled back their LGBT advocacy, losing their perfect score. They're given a score for this. Now, Global Data Neil Sodders told Ginn brands are in a pickle. They don't know what to do. There's a couple that are still holding strong, like Levi Strauss and Wells Fargo. But basically, they want to just leave things alone. But what's happening is consumers have finally used their wallets to tell these big companies what to do. Thanks to Bud Light and so many other casualties of excessive pride, Americans have started to realize how much power they have to change the corporate landscape. 80% of marketing executives are now nervous about how to play these divisive issues. And they should be. Only 20% of the country is now interested in corporations taking a stand on political issues or current events. Activism isn't selling like it used to. At the end of the day, consumers aren't asking for a lot. This isn't about Starbucks selling mega hats or Doritos clamoring for a border wall. All Americans want is neutrality. The assurance that when they shop for mouthwash, they're not hit over the head with an agenda that wants to neuter their children or groom them for RuPaul's Drag Race. Bottom line, money influences, and lack of money to woke companies is making a huge difference. Let me give you, I think there's one last one. This is under science. Why science hopes for extraterrestrial life. They're dying to have extraterrestrial life and proof of it. As multiple honest scientists have observed, a major reason for the search for purely physical explanations for phenomena is to prove God is not the answer. Why is this? Because if there's no God, then the Bible's nullified, along with moral law it teaches. In short, people hate being told how they should live their lives, even by their Creator. As a logical extension of this rebellious attitude, the hope of many scientists is to find life on other planets and nullify the myth that God created life on Earth, as the Bible says. He did. Billions of dollars have been spent in a never-ending quest to find life out there. For decades, almost 5 decades, scientists have searched the heavens with radio and space-based telescopes in the hope of detecting even the tiniest indication, tiniest sound of potential life on distant planets. One of the indicators they've searched for is rocky planets. Many cosmologists believe that a rocky planet is one of the hosts of essential prerequisites for life. Using the James Webb Space Telescope, the newest one, astronomers recently discovered such a planet outside our solar system, a rocky planet, nearly 9 times the size of Earth, 41 light years away. Unlike previous discoveries of rocky planets, this one appears to have an atmosphere. They got all excited about it. Yet all indications, every single one of them, suggest that this planet is extremely inhospitable to life. It is one of the hottest known rocky exoplanets ever, with an atmosphere that is unbreathable and a molten surface around 3,140 degrees Fahrenheit. No life-supporting planet beyond our own has yet been found. All the previous exoplanets have found to have atmospheres were gaseous planets, not rocky ones. As Webb pushes the frontier of exoplanets exploration, the discovery of a rocky one with an atmosphere would represent progress. But so far, they've not. As scientists continue in their quest to find life out there, they continue to reject the clear evidence of a creator right here on Earth. There are several key questions that, when honestly asked, lead one to conclude there is a reason life exists on our planet and no other planet. It's God's plan. That's in the news for tonight.